For almost all of human history, we've walked around thinking we're the rulers of this planet. But the truth? We're just living in an invisible empire. One that was here billions of years before us and, honestly, still runs the show. So let's dive into the incredible story of how we finally discovered the true masters of our world, microorganisms.
Our story starts where every story on Earth does, in cosmic fire and dust. About 4.6 billion years ago, the leftovers of an exploded star, a supernova, started to pull together. And from that cloud, our planet was born, a searing, molten ball of rock, a place you would not want to visit.
Over hundreds of millions of years, the planet cooled, oceans formed, and somewhere in those ancient waters, life sparked into existence. But it wasn't plants or animals, no. It was something way, way smaller, way more numerous, and totally, completely invisible to us.
So what is this unseen world, really? To get a handle on its power, you first have to appreciate its sheer scale. It's not just in some far-off place. It's everywhere, and in numbers that are just mind-boggling.
I want you to really try and picture this. Imagine a giant cosmic weighing scale. On one side, you put every single living thing you can see, all the trees, the insects, the fish, every person, every blue whale, the whole shebang. And on the other side, you just put the microorganisms. Well, that scale would tip, hard, to the side of the microbes. They are, without a doubt, the silent majority of life on Earth.
So, if they're everywhere, why did it take us so long to even know they existed? Well, the problem was simple. We just didn't have the tools. The story of microbiology is really the story of one single invention that cracked open a whole new universe for us, the microscope.
It all kind of started around 1590 with a couple of lens makers, Hans and Zacharias Janssen. They put some lenses together and made the first compound microscope. Then, fast forward to 1665, a guy named Robert Hooke uses his own scope to look at some mold and becomes the first person to actually describe a microorganism. But the real game changer? That came in 1676. Thanks to a Dutch merchant.
Meet Antony van Leeuwenhoek. Now, this guy wasn't some famous scientist. He was a cloth merchant. But he had this incredible hobby. He loved grinding lenses and building these tiny, super powerful microscopes in his spare time. He looked at everything. And one day, he took a look at a drop of water that had had some pepper soaking in it.
And what he saw absolutely changed everything. He called them animalcules, little animals. For the very first time, a human being was looking at bacteria. You can just feel the awe in his words, can't you? This bustling, vibrant, hidden world, all teeming with life in a single drop of water. Wow.
Leeuwenhoek's discovery was mind-blowing, but it also kicked off a massive new debate. If these tiny creatures are just everywhere, where in the world do they come from?
It's such a simple question, right? But it sparked one of the biggest scientific arguments in history, a fight that would last for almost 2 centuries. So you had 2 competing ideas. On one side was spontaneous generation. This was the old-school belief that life could just poof into existence from non-living stuff, like maggots appearing on rotting meat or mice coming from piles of grain. On the other side was this newer idea, biogenesis, that life only ever comes from other life.
The first real evidence against spontaneous generation came from Francesco Redi back in 1668. His experiment was so simple, it's brilliant. He put meat in a couple of jars. He left one open, and the other he covered with some gauze. Well, guess what? Maggots only showed up in the open jar. The point was clear. The maggots came from flies laying eggs, not from the meat itself.
But the debate still raged on. People argued, okay, sure, for maggots, but for microbes, it's different. It took the genius of Louis Pasteur in the 1860s to finally put the question to bed. He designed this incredible swan neck flask. He boiled broth inside to kill everything. But, and here's the clever part, the S-shaped neck let air in, but trapped any dust or microbes from that air in its curves, so the broth stayed perfectly clear. But the second he broke that neck off, or even just tilted the flask so the dust could touch the broth, it would cloud right up with microbial life.
And boom, just like that, the debate was over. Life, even microbial life, doesn't just appear out of thin air. It comes from other life. And this was so much more than just winning an argument. Pasteur's experiment is the foundation of modern sterilization. It's why we have pasteurization farm milk, a process that has saved countless lives by killing harmful bacteria. It completely changed public health forever.
Okay, so life comes from life. Check. But that just led to the next massive question.
If these microbes are alive, and they're everywhere, what are they doing? For centuries, people blamed sickness on everything from bad air to angry gods. But after Pasteur, a new suspicion started to grow.
It's one thing to suspect that these little germs were making people sick, but it's a whole other thing to prove it. And that proof? It came from the meticulous, careful work of a German doctor named Robert Koch. What Koch did was create basically a detective's rulebook for microbiology. To prove a specific germ caused a specific disease, you had to follow these 4 steps, which we now call Koch's postulates. First, you have to find the suspect in every sick patient. Second, you got to isolate it and grow it all by itself. Third, you infect a healthy subject with your isolated germ, and it has to get the same sickness. And finally, you have to find that exact same germ in the new patient.
This was an absolute revolution. It took medicine from the realm of guesswork and turned it into a science. Using this method, Koch was able to nail down the specific bacteria that caused killer diseases like anthrax, tuberculosis, and cholera. It wasn't just about identifying the bad guys, it gave us a target. This work cemented the germ theory of disease and is the entire reason we can identify and fight infectious diseases today.
Okay, so we've cracked 2 huge cases. We know microbes exist, and we know they can cause disease. But Pasteur's discovery that life only comes from life left one giant question just hanging there. A question that takes us all the way back to the beginning. If all life comes from other life, where did the very first life come from?
So let's rewind the tape. Way back, we're on early Earth, a planet with a nasty atmosphere and oceans that were basically a chemical soup. It was in that primordial soup, probably near super-hot deep-sea vents, that the chemistry of life first started cooking.
And what's so amazing is that every single living thing we know of, from the simplest bacterium to us, is built from the same 4 basic types of molecules. You've got your proteins, nucleic acids, polysaccharides, and lipids. They're like life's universal Lego bricks. The ultimate question is, how did those bricks first learn to build something?
Well, the leading theory today is called the RNA world hypothesis. Now, we all think of DNA as the blueprint of life, right? But its cousin, RNA, is a real jack of all trades. See, it can store genetic info like DNA, but it can also act like an enzyme to get chemical reactions going. So the idea is that the very first life just used RNA for everything. It was the blueprint and the builder, an all-in-one starter kit, before the more stable DNA took over the library duties later on.
And this all leads to one of the most profound, just awe-inspiring ideas in all of science. By tracing the family tree of life backward through genetics, scientists are pretty sure that every living thing on this planet, every plant, every animal, every fungus, every microbe, all of us can be traced back to a single population of ancestral cells. We call it LUCA, the last universal common ancestor.
So from that one ancient microbe, life exploded into the incredible, complex web we see today. We've gone from the birth of a planet to the discovery of the hidden empire that truly runs it. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible worlds are still out there, just waiting for us to find the right way to look?